Welcome to the very first episode of the Paradox Port podcast. This is a show where we introduce you to magic products for mythic lives, as we like to say, and the people who create them. This first episode is a bit of an experiment. The world is already absolutely drowning in podcasts, and I thought to myself, why not contribute to the noise? Why not release one more podcast into the wild and hope that maybe, just maybe, a few curious wanderers stumble upon it and decide to stay? So here I am, yelling into the void, waiting for the void to yell back, or whisper, or leave critical comments. I'll take whatever you're willing to send my way. On the show, I sit down with people who are building strange, beautiful, and genuinely useful things. Apps, journals, games, systems, tools for thinking differently about your life. Things that help you grow, reflect, explore, or just live a bit more intentionally in a very chaotic world. The goal is simple. I want to introduce you to brilliant creatives and help you discover new things you might actually want to use in your own life. If you don't know me yet, hi, I'm Ari. I've worked in organizational psychology and behavioral science for most of my career, studying what helps people thrive at work and in life more broadly. In the last few years, I've sort of pivoted hard into building products and worlds that teach psychology through play, story, and self-exploration. Which brings me to today's guest. Today I'm joined by Thomas Shellberg, creator of Emberglow, a mobile app that dares to ask the dangerous question, what if your phone was not your master, but the final boss? So this episode's going to be a little different since it's our first one and we're just giving this a go. Thomas and I will both sort of be in the hot seat, taking turns asking questions, interrogating each other's products, and comparing notes from the front lines of trying to build things that are good for humans in a world that mostly optimizes for attention extraction. So, Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ari. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. Thomas, to kick us off, I would just love you to quickly introduce yourself. Who are you and what are you building right now?
So I'm Thomas Shellberg. I'm a web developer now for about 6 years. And I developed a mobile app called Emberglow. And it was sort of something to help me fix one of the problems I was having myself. So what Emberglow does is it turns screen breaks into epic adventures. So you lock your phone, you can send your hero onto a quest, and they will return to a new chapter of a narrative story and also an improved character. And you get to unlock a world that I built called Vedros and the stories that are built into that kingdom, I guess you could call it. So essentially, the less you use your phone, the more present you become in your real life, and the more your hero grows. And hopefully you can start to see yourself as being on that journey. No spoilers, but yeah.
Nice, amazing. Yeah, it was an idea that when I saw it instantly caught my attention, and I think I subscribed to your email list immediately and then reached out and we started talking. And but it's just it's a brilliant idea, and really excited to dig into it a little bit more. You foreshadowed this a little bit, but what was sort of the problem that you were trying to solve when you built Emberglow, and how did it kind of manifest in your life? Was there like a moment where you were like, okay, something has got to change here?
Yeah. Well, for one, I'm always been a very distractible person. It can just take, a 1-minute phone unlock to send you onto, a 1-hour YouTube binge or, Instagram binge. I tried many different types of productivity apps, and I noticed that many of them were built around sort of blocking things or shaming you. Everything sort of was based around punitive measures. And I wanted to try something that was more not only positive, but also compelling. We'll probably get into this a little bit more, but I felt like I'd never seen a productivity app that was based around stories that made you feel like either you yourself was on a hero's journey towards becoming better, or you were in control of a character that you could relate to that was going through a hero's journey. And I would say the biggest moment that I had was actually when I was with my kids. I have 2 young daughters, and I was sitting on the couch on the laptop trying to do something productive, not like doom scrolling or anything, but convincing myself I was doing something productive at least. And they started getting rowdy like kids normally do. And I could feel myself getting irritated because it was distracting. And it would be really easy to either go somewhere else or to tell them to be quiet, to stop them from having fun, essentially. And I realized in that moment, I actually needed to get closer to them and like turn my device off and join their little world and have fun with them. And so that's essentially what I did. I had already built the prototype of Emberglow at the time. So
Mm.
I set a 60-minute quest and I called it Play with My Kids. And then I locked my phone, which started the quest. And then funny enough, I ended up like not looking at my phone for like 2 hours. So not only did it work, but I actually ended up staying off my phone longer than I expected.
Beautiful. I love that that example and that origin story. And I think that's something that we both sort of experienced, going back to something earlier that you were saying about stories and narratives. Was like, I think both you and I went out and looked for various productivity apps, and there's a ton of them out there. And there's lots that even kind of gamify behavior change, but something that seemed to be consistently lacking, to me at least, was a narrative, a story, a world. A lot of them were just kind of like glorified habit trackers with a couple of badges and items you could equip and things like that, but there wasn't actually any like evolving narrative element that kept you coming back to it. And it sounds like that's something that you really wanted to focus on in Emberglow. It's really like a story first app, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and funny enough, I actually went through my Reddit history because I was trying to remember how we actually messaged each other. And the first thing I think is you had a post on Reddit that asked about like, is there a product like this that it's a productivity app with like a story and a narrative? And I said, hey, I'm actually building something right now. If you want to. And then we started messaging each other, and we found out we had sort of a similar vision.
I totally forgot that that was the origin story of our interaction. But yeah, let's dive just a little bit more into like how Emberglow actually looks and works. So I mean, it sounds like the basic mechanic is just you sort of lock your phone, and based on how the parameters you set for yourself, let's say you want to lock it for like 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever. If you succeed in doing that and not picking up your phone, then you kind of get an additional bit of story. Is that correct? And sort of what other elements are in there as well?
Sure. Yeah, there's a few different ways to I guess you could call play Emberglow. There's sort of a structured story method, which basically teaches you about Vedros, the kingdom, and your character goes through this entire story and character arc. And it's set up in such a way that the duration that you need to lock your phone is very, very short. Like the first quest is
Hmm.
like 3 minutes long. I mean, anybody should be able to lock their phone for 3 minutes. Although you'd be surprised how many people fail to do that. But um, baby steps. And the
Absolutely.
idea is you don't really need to think about what you need to lock your phone for or how long. You progressively step up to longer and longer durations of locking your phone, and you'll get, of course, more and more rewards, but also get closer and closer to discovering what's going wrong in this kingdom, why you don't remember who you are. Um, yeah, essentially, you are a character that wakes up not knowing who they are, or they have no idea why they're in the place that they are, but they know that there's something wrong with it. And I feel like I think there is a metaphor there for many of us right now who are trying to find productivity apps that help them. They know something is wrong. There's some kind of darkness out there that is grabbing their attention or preventing them from being the person they want to be, but they don't see themselves as this hero on a journey. They most likely feel quite bad about themselves. So I think it will help them to see themselves as a hero on a journey that takes quite a long time.
Mm. I love that. So there's some sort of like core mystery that is, I mean, I haven't progressed through the whole thing, but it sounds like it is very compelling, such that it actually wants to. I don't know, when you read a bit, you want to know what happens next. There's something you're trying to actually unravel and understand. It's not just kind of like a plotting, ongoing narrative.
Yeah, and I actually built in branching storylines as well. Took a bit of time to do that because it's quite complex, but
It is.
there's every quest in the story version starts with a decision. So you can do X or you can do Y. And those do actually have consequences in how the story plays out. Sometimes you can make a bad decision that actually ends your story in death, and you'll have to roll back and
Nice.
not all the way to the beginning, but to the last point where you made a decision and try from somewhere else. I forget the name of the game, but there's a mobile game that's similar in that it's completely text based. But every time you have a binary decision, do this or do Y, or do X or do Y, and uh, you half the time you end up like dying. And you would think that it would be really frustrating, but it was actually really cool to go back and try different scenarios and different decisions, and eventually complete the story. So a little bit from there.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think that's. I'm glad you included that. I think a game without any stakes is, barely a game. So I think having a little bit of risk was a really good idea. But I also like that that you made it such that in terms of actually the amount of time that you need to lock your screen, you started out really minimal there, and you made it so that people can easily start getting some small wins and building some efficacy, and they're like, okay, this is totally doable, and then it progresses as it goes. I think if you had started off like with now lock your phone for an hour or two, that would have been a bit of a pain and would lose a lot of users for sure.
Yeah, as a software engineer, you think a lot about onboarding, and so I've put a lot of time into onboarding in Emberglow, just cutting and cutting and cutting as much out of there as possible, and trying to get people to the first bit of story as quickly as possible, because hopefully that will get them interested.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. What about I don't know, in a world where so many apps aren't really designed with human flourishing at their core, how did you think about approaching this in terms of ethical design and really supporting human flourishing? And you were mentioning a book to me before we started recording this. Maybe you can bring that in as well.
Sure. Well, I can tell you it's really hard to compete for attention on somebody's mobile device. Competing with TikTok and Instagram and like brain rot games that have lots of sounds and constant dopamine rewards. It's very, very difficult. Um, so I think simplicity for me was the first one. It should be very easy for someone to start a quest. They shouldn't have to think too much about it. They shouldn't have to fight against the distractions that they already have. So a lot of the existing productivity apps that you'll set a timer or something on your phone. Your phone will still be open and you could still see this timer, right? So you could cancel the timer and do something else. That's a little too easy.
Mm,
And so my approach is much more of a digital detox. I want to take a half an hour and do something else other than something active on my screen. And what's cool is it only cares about you unlocking your phone. So you can still answer phone calls. You can still change music if you have music playing. You can snap a picture if you're at a party or a restaurant or something without unlocking the phone. So it has one one really interesting scenario is a couple that goes out to dinner or friends that go out to dinner. You can lock your phone for an hour. Nobody needs to like throw their phones into a bag or anything like that. You just lock them and everybody can progress together.
I
And I
love it.
think
Yeah.
it's really difficult to build a product that that gets people to use it habitually while also ethically designing it. And that's one reason why I was reading a book called Hooked, and it essentially teaches you all of the tricks that a lot of the social media companies have been using to get people to habitually use products, whether they're good for them or not. And so one of the big challenges is knowing who is using your product, recognizing what internal triggers they have or cues that they have that would make them uh, want to use your product or something else like it. So it could be, if you take Instagram as an example, an internal cue, it could be boredom, sitting on the couch, don't know what to do. I associate Instagram with relieving the pain of boredom because it gives me instant content and something interesting. Or I feel, I don't know, maybe I'm on out in public and I feel lonely or socially awkward or something like that. I can go to this uh, virtual place and feel social or feel validated by looking at likes from my own pictures or whatever it is. So yeah, the challenge with products like yours and mine is finding the internal trigger that people have, which is often this sort of the same thing. Either I'm bored, I'm about to start doom scrolling, and then associating my product with the relief from that pain, essentially. So it's
Mm.
associating your product with the relief of that pain that they have.
Okay, so the kind of cue that you're really targeting is that same bored or listless or whatever feeling, and then instead of going to Instagram, you're trying to get people to condition themselves to do the routine of just locking their phone and being like, all right, I'm bored, I'm going to start mindlessly scrolling. Now's the time to just lock the phone, and then the reward, presumably, is just like that they feel better and they, lead a more full, fulfilling life in some way or something along those lines.
Yeah, and also funny enough, like a really silly example is how hard it is to just watch a movie without a second
Mm-hmm.
screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've found myself now like locking my phone and starting a quest to watch an hour-long show or something because it is so ubiquitous now having two screens open at the same time. And it feels like, I mean, 10 years ago or maybe 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing, like you watched a movie with your full attention. And now that's like focus mode.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy that we have to think so intentionally and actually try to build products and tools that help people recapture their attention because, there's just all these asymmetrically powerful algorithms pointed at our minds that are constantly trying to extract attention and capture value out of us. So it's kind of a weird situation that we're in, that we have to use some of these like behavioral design and psychology principles like the habit loop that you were referencing earlier. We have to use those when we're designing these products that are actually trying to recapture people's attention, but we're competing against things that do that really, really well, and that is not an easy task, as you already mentioned.
Yeah, and something else I'm kind of also thinking about is status. And there's also another great book called Status. I think it's Will Storr, The Status Game. That many of our decisions just come from status, from trying to belong to a group, from trying to assert ourselves a hierarchy, and like which group you belong to determines what kind of status game you're playing.
Hmm.
And one of the new status games that I see coming out is like a digital detox, in that people I think are starting to become, I don't know how you would say it. It's almost becoming cool to put your phone down for a day and not respond to anybody, or to be able to not look at your phone for 2 or 3 hours. I could see that becoming a new sort of status game, like an antithesis to the current addiction that we have. So there's almost a way there as a product designer to integrate with that status game.
Yeah, I love that idea. I hadn't thought of it that way. I haven't read that book either, but I did hear that guy. I think you said his name was Will on a couple of podcasts when he was doing the rounds for his book. But I also think there's probably going to be a status game also around like AI versus sort of human content. Like, I only consume like, I stay away from all the brain rot stuff from the, AI generated slop and all of that. And I consume, I only follow these human creators, and that's kind of like becomes a bit of my identity. And maybe even there's like people who are only supporting or using products that are free of AI generated content. I'm not totally sure how it could go, but I could definitely see some sort of like status signaling around only having human made things in your diet, in your information diet, in your house, whatever that might be. I could see it expanding to that as well.
Yeah, or I only read like physical copies of tweets that are delivered to me weekly in a subscription that goes on my coffee table.
That's actually
Yeah.
not a bad idea, man. Yeah. I mean I have been seeing a lot of things like that in terms of like uh I don't know, I just found this company the other day that like basically just takes like Wikipedia articles or just information on various fun historical facts and periods and things like that, and like sends them to your house in these beautiful handwritten and illustrated notes, and just like a kind of like you pick something that you're interested in, and they'll send you 10 notes over time about that. But I could see an actual trend of more things like that, where like you choose to get the information delivered to you physically and something like that. I don't know if who knows, but
Yeah.
could be interesting. What about in terms of just like what has been some of the most challenging parts of stepping into this world and designing an app and just the design process in general?
I would say writing a story is quite hard. I've done writing before. I think before this, I had considered myself a decent enough writer, but um, it's amazing how little story you can actually write in, like, 90 minutes of narration. How difficult it is to accomplish the character arcs that you want to accomplish, to foster the relationships in the story that you want to, or to have consequences or conflicts. Um, writing a really great story is really, really hard. So I think I'm looking forward to partnerships in the future with real writers to make, like, I think it'd be really cool to have seasons or chapters or worlds built by existing authors. Maybe they have their own world already built and they could build their own version of that in sort of like a limited time sort of story inside of Emberglow.
I absolutely love that idea, and I can totally resonate. I've been thinking about that as well in terms of partnerships with authors and writers down the road. But it is just like world building is a hard thing. Like developing a compelling character is a hard thing. It is it is not easy. But it sounds like for you, like the actual you're an expert in web development and coding and all of that sort of stuff. So that was maybe less hard actually than just, developing a compelling story that keeps people coming back.
Yeah, I think most people focus on sort of like implementation of how something works and like how difficult it is to make an algorithm or something like that. But the true engineering and software engineering is much more abstract. It's much more like the interactions that people have with your product, how pleasing it is to use. Does it feel good to use? How do I feel when I think about this product? Um, how do I feel while I'm using it? Yeah, it's much more. You spend a lot more time thinking about that than like how to actually code something, and that's much more of the art of building a product than the code.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, Thomas, if someone wants to try Emberglow or to find you, where should they go?
Yeah, so I'm Tommy Shellberg on most socials. Emberglow you can find at emberglowapp.com and also on Instagram. And I don't really use X much right now. I would say mostly Instagram, but we also have a website. And
And
also,
what
of
are
course,
the
Play Store and the Android App Store.
okay, that was going to be my following question. So it is up live now because I know you were rehashing a couple of things and I think took it down for a second, but it's live now.
Yep, it's fully free. There's a premium version, but you can play through a lot of the story for free. And yeah, fully functional.
Amazing. Okay, well, now that I know that, I will download it and start using it directly after this call. um, awesome. Well, do you want to just maybe flip the script a little bit, and maybe I'll drag you into my world a little bit? You down for giving that a go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, tell people about your product first, and then I could tell them what I've already done with it.
Okay, amazing. Yeah. So for anyone listening who doesn't know, Just Roll With It is the product I've been building. I will show you a quick image of it for those of you who are actually watching the video here. It's a journal. It's the flagship product from my company Paradox Port, and basically it's a journal that's designed to help you build habits to understand yourself and to kind of create real change in your life through game mechanics, through story, through hopefully a lot of fun. And it's sort of just like if a habit journal and a role-playing game had a baby. It's a little bit of like a choose your own adventure game book type thing where you kind of explore a realm and have new encounters each day. And then you're also just learning a lot about psychology and behavioral science, which is my background, and I've kind of woven that throughout the journal, and we could talk a little bit more about how that actually looks. But yeah, Thomas, you've only had access to the digital PDF version so far, not the actual physical artifact, which is currently being shipped across the Pacific Ocean. So hopefully you'll get that in not too long. But yeah, let's turn it over to you now that you have had a little bit of time to interact with it. Do you have any questions, thoughts, anything about the book that you would like to chat about?
Yeah. First of all, it's a great design and a fantastic accomplishment. There's so much in there. I think the digital version's like 250 pages or something like that. It's it's so much packed into one little book. It's really really cool, and it's all
Thank you.
it's really funny. I could see why we had sort of like a an instant connection about our vision, because while I'm reading through it, I'm like, yeah, this is how I would have written Emberglow like as well. So it's really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just before you continue on, it's hilarious. Like even before we knew each other, we wrote like very similar introductions, sort of like where, you wake up in a forest and you're like disoriented and you have no idea who you are, and there's some unknown, mystery that you have to kind of unravel. It's just a very similar intro, which I thought was pretty funny.
yeah, and like a kingdom that's sort of in disarray because of this dark forest that you're not sure about, and yeah, there's a lot of parallels there.
Totally.
But yeah, I could talk a little bit about like how I opened it up. So yeah, essentially, you go through this introduction, like you said, you start out directly with the story, which is great. We chatted a little bit about this, but onboarding exists for every product. So your journal is no different. There's an
Hmm.
onboarding process of getting somebody into a story, slowly teaching them bit by bit the mechanics, which I think you've done a really good job of doing, sort of giving people the information when they need it. So it's not too much of an overload. Um, so yeah, essentially you wake up, you don't know who you are, you sort of wander a little bit and you end up, I don't know how much I could tell, but you end up in a tavern, and you get told a few things about the kingdom and where you're at, and you start to already feel like you have this journey in front of you that you need to accomplish. So the first day, I believe, is mostly figuring out who you are. So you'll pick a character, which again, we have very similar character types.
Yeah, I mean they're
Wizards
they're
and
kind of
knights, and
the traditional like role playing game Dungeons and Dragons archetype. So that checks out.
one that was different, and it's actually the one that I picked, that I don't have, is you have a monk character, and I ended up
Mm-hmm.
choosing the monk character. So
Nice.
yeah, and I think if I can remember, the reason why is because I think he has this like a kind of a perk, I guess you could say, where if you do some kind of mindfulness activity, meditation, then you'll get sort of like an extra resolve point every day. I think it's called resolve. So
Yep.
that was my plan, is focusing on that, and yeah, I could talk a little bit
Nice.
about what my goal was with that
Yeah,
character,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about your just to give people an idea of how this actually looks like. Uh, every when you pick a character, you're also encouraged to select a calling, which kind of is a general, like, thematic direction of what you want to focus on over the coming months while you're using this journal, which is supposed to last uh, around 3-ish months, but it could take a little longer depending on how long or how frequently you use it. But, for example, the monk might have a calling of, focus or mindfulness. But then, different characters could also focus on things like fitness or creativity, depending on which character you end up selecting. So, What was your general kind of focus area that you were hoping to grow in over the coming months?
Yeah, so this one I think will open a whole can of worms, but an interesting conversation. So I
Let's
think
do it.
when you first get into looking at productivity and you start watching videos online, you'll see videos of people with these extravagant morning routines where they'll like spend 2 or 3 hours doing like 10 different things. And that sort of becomes the expectation of like what a day looks like. And I think that sets up a lot of people for failure because there's so many steps that require each one requires motivation and expertise in actually doing the thing. And so um, you can almost think of it like mathematically. Let's say I need to wake up early at 5 in the morning, like all of these videos say I should do. Even if I'm even if I'm accomplishing that 80% of the time on its own, um, if there's 10 other steps to my morning routine and each of them I do like 80% of the time, accomplishing all of those in one day is like 1 in 4 chance.
Hmm.
So if you base your happiness and your self-worth on doing all of these things perfectly every day, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so what I wanted to do is go through just roll with it and have like as simple goal as possible, in the hopes that accomplishing this will have like a cascading effect. So my goal was to go to bed early and to read before I go to bed, and then wake up early. That's like pretty much it, because I know that sleep for me has always been the biggest problem, and I know that being sleep deprived over a long amount of time just has so many other cascading bad effects. And so, yeah, that's essentially my goal, is to set myself up for success.
Nice, nice. I absolutely love that, and that is something that I really kind of tried to do. I guess on two levels. One, just making the book like a little bit more gentle and not kind of obsessing about all the like what I view as slightly toxic productivity, approaches to change and growth and flourishing, and like just constantly being on that grind and doing everything perfectly. And it's designed to be a little bit more flexible and forgiving, and it encourages you at the beginning just to really focus on like one thing, and then as time progresses there's opportunities for you to add in more habits and try additional things. But I think that kind of like starting with what I can't remember who said this word. It might have been Charles Duhigg or someone like that. But the kind of keystone habit sort of idea of just like really picking one thing to start with, that then everything else can kind of ladder up to. And yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. So you're really just focusing on that kind of sleep theme, and then within that, there's a couple of kind of subtasks of like just go to bed early, read, and then wake up early, and that's pretty much all you're tracking at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. I am tracking some other things. I have some other goals, but I know that if I do the main thing correctly, I will have more energy, more motivation, and more willpower to do the other things that I want to do. So one of the other side goals is running. So I have a half
Nice.
marathon that I'm going to do next month. So that's sort of a longer term thing where I need to be practicing several times a week. And waking up early and going to bed early sets me up to be able to actually do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I don't know, the journal's also kind of designed such that basically each day you decide what goals you want to work on for that day. And the only thing that really matters is that if you write down that you're going to do something, that you then actually do that thing. And that could look like every day you're writing down that you want to go to sleep early. And then if you do that, then your the metric that kind of tracks is called resolve, and your resolve will increment if you do that. But if you write down like five things and then you don't do a good chunk of them, then you don't get to increment your resolve that day. So it's really kind of up to you to determine how much you want to bite off in a given day, which was intentional, because I know at least for me, like often when I kind of decide my life really needs a change and I need to pivot, I'll like tell myself that I need to start doing 10 things differently. Like I need to start going to the gym more. I need to start meditating again. I need to start, eating super well. I need to do all these other things that are, like good and ideal, but I'm clearly not going to do all of them. And then I tend to, crash and burn somewhat spectacularly and not actually do a lot of them. So I kind of tried to hedge against that a little bit. Yeah. What else about what else have you noticed so far? Like how does the world feel? How does how do the kind of encounters play out? How does all of that mix together in your experience so far?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on day 3, and on day 2, you encounter sort of the first evil, I guess you could say, or uh, dark aspects of the world, and very similar to mine, to Emberglow. And I think after the second day, you unlock your first spell. And
Hmm.
so the first spell that I unlocked was the habit loop, which I'd heard of before, especially from Hooked. I think they sort of just re-engineer the habit loop. So yeah, essentially you learn about the habit loop, the cues, the routine, and the reward, and then you'll pick out something that you want to change, and you'll figure out what your cue is, what the routine is that you want to change or get rid of, and then how you're going to reward yourself. So I can just give you an example. Like my cue will be setting an alarm for a specific bedtime, 10 o'clock. Uh, no matter what I'm working on, unless it's like, family or something, I have to pause that work and pick it up later. So some of it is conditioning yourself to know, like, I don't have to do this right now. I have time tomorrow. The world's not going to burn. I don't need to stay up late. Um, the rewards part of it is internal. So just the feeling of being in a warm bed, um, the feeling of waking up before everyone else to start the day on my terms. I don't know if you feel the same about this, but I think there is something fundamentally different about waking up early versus burning the midnight oil, like staying up late and getting something done. Like if the waking up early before everyone else feels much more rewarding, I guess I would say, and much more of like a hack, or you're awake before everyone else, and if you can get something done before you normally wake up, your day is set up for success.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just that like you it feels like the time is kind of more on your own terms. Like, when you're burning the midnight oil, it's because, like, oh shit, I've run out of time. Like, I need to get something done. But, like, I don't know, getting up early feels more of like you're reclaiming your time rather than fighting for it. But, again, everything in balance. I think the wake up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. can be pushed a little bit far, but it's, you figure out what kind of works for you and your natural rhythms and when you're the most productive and energized and excited to be you and go with that.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a bit more about the habit loop and
Um,
how it's used?
yeah, I mean, the habit loop in particular, like, is a pretty commonly talked about thing. Just in terms of like figuring out a cue that you know triggers a behavior, and then the behavior or the routine is then supported by some sort of reward. I think one thing that just is interesting with the habit loop in particular is like the reward can often be a little bit confusing, because a lot of the things that we do not because we're getting some like extrinsic reward, someone's giving us something or we're giving ourselves something, but because of like more of an internal state in terms of how it makes us actually feel. So, I think when you're like reading examples about it, about how to set up the habit loop, like sometimes you'll read stuff about like, okay, I went to the gym and then, my reward is that I get to watch an episode of my favorite show. And I think that, that works. Like, I think you can kind of decide what you want your reward to be. But I think, at least in my experience and in some of the literature that I've read, the the habit starts becoming more solid and more enduring when it's really more about the internal state, when the reward is some way that you feel, either like physically or about yourself or something along those lines. And I think that's just an important distinction. Like ideally, maybe you start with giving yourself an external reward for doing some activity. Um, but over time, just like becoming more aware of how that activity actually makes you feel internally and framing that as the reward itself. Like for just quick example, when you go to the gym, um, I don't know about for everyone, but I think most people feel some sense of like relaxation, maybe a slight endorphin rush or whatever it might be. But there is a notable difference in state of mind and the feelings within your body that you can pick up upon after going to the gym. So if you kind of frame that as being the reward in and of itself, sometimes that's like more powerful than saying, now I get to like watch something or eat something yummy or whatever it might be. So yeah, that's just kind of an interesting distinction that I played around with in the habit loop, and I tried to make clear in the book. It's still a little bit confusing, and a lot of people get kind of hung up on that when trying to create a habit loop. But just maybe one thing else I'll touch on quickly is I just liked the idea of taking all of these behavioral science principles and psychology and all these different things and treating them as spells. And sort of throughout the journal, you'll find there's 10 different spells that you can encounter. They're all science-based principles, practices, tips that then you can apply to your life in some way. But it just kind of seemed to me like a fun way of framing things because I don't know, if you think about it, like just the ability of the human mind to set a goal, to say, I want to do this or I want to become this in a year's time, and then actually take steps to change yourself, change your environment, and become that thing or do that thing. Like that's pretty magical. That I don't know. Like there's not many other animals. There are no other animals, as far as I'm aware, who can do that. Who can like set a long term goal and literally move the world around them to make that happen. So just kind of like with that core insight, like that sort of feels like magic. So why not just describe this whole system as like a magic system, as a spell system? So you're learning things that actually allow you to change the world around you and to change yourself along the process. So yeah, I don't know if that resonates with you, but it just kind of felt like a fun shift, a reframing that makes things seem a little bit less dry and a little bit more full of life.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think one of the things that love about having kids is also it keeps some of that childlike energy around and some of that the mystique and wonder of the world, and there's even great literature around about how much we learn from play and how we sort of forget that as we grow older, how much you learn and grow from just playing and imagining different ways that the world can be. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's kind of my long-term vision for what I'm doing here with this product, with the ones I'm currently working on, but it is to just reintroduce a sense of like play and magic into growth and development, and like, kind of take a game first, a play first, a joy first approach to change, instead of just having it be all these sort of self-help books or just like, YouTube shorts that you watch that tell you all the morning routines you're not doing and all of that stuff, and just kind of make the whole experience a little bit more fun. Um, I did want to just quickly ask you, like, what, because I made this book. It's, a physical sort of hard copy thing that you can hold in your hand, and you're working on an app. What do you see as some of the trade-offs between digital products like Emberglow and physical products like a journal? Where does digital win? Where does physical win? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So each one has its own positives and negatives. The really, like I said before, the really tricky part about using, like building a mobile app is that it's now on a device that already captures a lot of their attention. So now you're basically inserting yourself into this pie of existing apps that you now have to figure out how to make habitual. And so you have to sort of use some of the same tricks, but in a more ethical way. You have to find ways to reinforce using that app every day and to make people think of the app when they associate, like we talked about, these internal triggers, when they associate these painful feelings, you could say, like with the relief from your app. So that's really tricky. One of the positives is that, of course, you have access to things like notifications to sort of captures people's attention and tell them, hey, you wanted to make this a routine, so I'm going to send you a notification every day to help remind you of it. That's a good positive. A book can't really do that, but a book um, exists in a physical place, so you see that as well. If it sits on your coffee table, you see that throughout the day. So you, especially if it's in a prominent place, you may get a notification from the phone or no, from the book, right? Like 10, 20 times. And maybe after the 10th time you say, okay, I'm actually going to sit down and make some time for this thing. And I think I think a lot of people really start to appreciate the feel of a book. I mean, I have an Amazon Kindle, which I read books on, but I've noticed that I mostly like reading nonfiction through the Kindle because I like highlighting and learning through it. But if it's a book, if it's a fiction book, I like it to be an actual book that I feel and flip through, and so there's something visceral and different about that. I think maybe a digital version can sometimes be more associated with productivity, whereas the book can feel more like the story. Who knows? Maybe even the ultimate product is a combination of both. Like, you know, we've even
Yeah.
talked about that before. Yeah.
Yeah. It it is an interesting trade-off. I think when I was considering what I actually wanted to create, and ended up going with physical, the main thought process behind that, in terms of why I didn't want to actually make an app or something. Well, one, I couldn't. I don't have the technical skills to develop an app, and I would have to hire someone to do so. But two, it's just like, you know, it almost feels like having productivity apps on a phone is a bit of a recipe for disaster, just in terms of like a phone being a portal into a universe of distractions. So if you're trying to have like a habit tracker app on your phone, anytime you unlock your phone and start looking through your apps, that habit tracker app is now competing with Instagram and TikTok and everything else, and usually those will win out in terms of the attention. And you'll try to open your phone to add some habits or whatever, and then you'll find yourself already in a rabbit hole of some sort, which I think is honestly where your product is unique, in that it's one of the only things out there that is really encouraging people to actually take some agentic action and intentionally restrain themselves from using their phone. So I think that does kind of set your use case apart a little bit. But for mine, I was just a little bit hesitant to like try to put another productivity app out there that, sure, it's fun and it's got a story and it's, got some magical twists and turns, but at the end of the day, it's still like on an app store or on a homepage that is competing with like a lot of much more attention grabbing things. So that was a bit of my thought process there.
Yeah. And I also think, uh, I think the map is really cool. I can also see like, you know, finishing the book and getting as a like a celebratory reward, like a printable version of the map mailed to me. Like, you know, send me a screenshot of you finishing, going through, just roll with it, and I'll send you the map of Glimmerwood, I believe it's called.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's a great idea, and one that I had similar, like, I was thinking of designing some sort of like fun, like medieval, like certificate of completion, like with, like kind of a scribe's flourishes or something along those lines. That was an idea I had, but I never got around to it because I didn't quite have the design skills to make something that I was satisfied with. So maybe just a map will work. Maybe I'll be mailing out some maps in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, those are things you can always do after the fact. So there's always a iterative process, even with print books.
Absolutely, yeah. That is a great point. Well, Thomas, before we wrap up, I have just one question that I ask everyone, or I guess will ask everyone, because you're the first. But what is one habit or ritual or rule that you personally live by that has made your life better?
Oh, that's a tough one, especially to answer as someone who is now trying to find that themselves, right? Um, I would say what I want it to be is, of course, getting really great sleep, but I've kind of already said that. I think one of the things on my mind right now is I think there's like a rare person that we all attach to. It's the person that no matter what seems to be going on, they always seem to have like um the attention capacity to stop what they're doing and like say hi to you and ask you how you're doing and listen and show like joy and compassion. And all too often I'm lost in my own thoughts, and or there's something else going on, I'm talking to someone else and someone comes up to me and we have like a very short exchange, and afterwards you feel like I could have given them more attention. I could have, showed like real interest in seeing them. And so that's one thing I really want to get much better at, is being that person that's like always joyful to see. When you meet them, you're going to have like a great conversation. They'll give you their full attention and not just think of themselves.
And that is just such a gift. I think even more so today than at any other point in time, with a world that is so full of distractions. So, yeah, I think you're right on with that. That's an archetype I think we all aspire to be more of, or we don't all, but a lot of us do, and some people just kind of seem to naturally uh, flow in that way through life. But yeah, here's to hoping that there's more of us in the world who start living into that way of being.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for joining me, for building something that really fights for people's attention rather than stealing it, for giving people more agency, for just being a good guy trying to do good things in this world. And thanks to everyone who's listening and hanging out with us. If you like this conversation, please subscribe once we get this up on whatever various podcast apps it's going to be on, and share it with someone who maybe needs to use their phone less. And go check out Emberglow as well. And until next time, keep building mythic lives, my friends.